Welcome back to our channel on this beautiful day. We have some incredibly explosive and heartbreaking updates from the world of the bold and the beautiful. Grab a cup of coffee and settle in as we dive deep into the latest jaw-dropping drama that is about to change everything for our favorite characters. The dazzling lights of the Logan fashion show had barely dimmed, but for Hope Logan Spencer, the vibrant applause had already faded into a deafening, hollow silence. She had achieved the impossible, launching her new brand to unprecedented critical and commercial acclaim, completely eclipsing Eric Forrester's highly anticipated haute couture return. Yet, as the fashion world crowned her, their new undisputed queen, Hope was drowning in an ocean of crushing guilt and profound psychological trauma. The cost of her defection from Forrester Creations was not merely a corporate shift. It was the complete and utter obliteration of her relationship with her mother. Brooke Logan Forrester's furious disownment echoed relentlessly in Hope's mind, transforming her monumental professional victory into a waking nightmare of personal devastation that she could not escape. The fragile equilibrium of Hope's world was violently shattered when she received the most terrifying news a daughter could ever hear. Word reached her that Brooke was experiencing a severe, catastrophic psychological breakdown as a direct result of the escalating family war. The reports painted a harrowing picture of a woman completely undone by grief. Brooke, isolated and consumed by maternal sorrow and corporate fury, was allegedly standing on the perilous precipice of an alcohol relapse. For Hope, who had spent her entire life witnessing the destructive, dark shadow of her mother's battle with addiction, this information was a paralyzing blow. The mere thought of Brooke reaching for a bottle, spiraling back into the dangerous abyss of alcoholism because of Hope's career choices, was a burden too heavy for her fragile conscience to bear. Driven by a desperate, consuming panic, Hope realized that no amount of runway success, no glowing reviews, and no corporate autonomy could ever justify the destruction of her mother's life. The sparkling allure of Katie Logan's fashion house, the groundbreaking designs crafted by Deke Sharp, and the unwavering support of Liam Spencer suddenly meant absolutely nothing. Hope made the agonizing, heartbreaking decision to sacrifice herself on the altar of family loyalty. She resolved to abandon her massive, unprecedented triumph at Logan, walking away from the very empire she had just helped build. It was a choice born of pure, unadulterated terror and profound love, a willingness to completely destroy her own professional future if it meant pulling Brooke back from the dangerous edge of a relapse. The journey back to Forrester Creations was a grueling, humiliating march into the lion's den. Hope knew exactly what awaited her within the sleek, glass-paneled walls of the company she had so recently betrayed. She was not returning as a conquering hero or a respected designer. She was returning as a broken, desperate daughter begging for mercy. The atmosphere in the executive suite was thick with tension and smug satisfaction as she faced Steffy Forrester Finnegan. Steffy, who had been plotting ruthless retaliation against the new Logan brand, now looked upon her defeated rival with cold, calculating triumph. Hope swallowed her pride, her dignity, and her ambition, offering Steffy the ultimate surrender in exchange for a truce that might save her mother's sanity and restore the fractured peace of their family. The terms of Hope's surrender were designed to inflict maximum psychological degradation. Steffy, seizing the opportunity to permanently neutralize the threat Hope posed, demanded complete and total capitulation. Hope was forced to accept a position not as a lead designer, not as a creative director, but as Steffy's personal assistant. It was a staggering, humiliating demotion intended to break Hope's spirit and publicly display Steffy's absolute dominance over the Forrester empire. Every coffee run, every scheduling task, every menial chore would be a constant, stinging reminder of Hope's defeat. Yet, Hope accepted this excruciating humiliation without a single word of protest. her mind fixated solely on the desperate hope that her sacrifice would bring Brooke the peace she so desperately needed. The final, devastating blow came in the form of a legally binding contract. Steffy and Ridge Forrester demanded that Hope sign over all rights, trademarks, and creative control of her brand, effectively transferring her entire legacy back into the hands of Forrester Creations. As Hope gripped the pen, her hand trembling under the intense, watchful eyes of her former family, she felt a piece of her soul being ripped away. She was signing away her identity, her hard-fought independence, and the spectacular future she had just secured alongside Katie Logan. The ink flowed onto the crisp white paper, sealing her fate and finalizing the corporate transfer. She had given them everything, holding nothing back, all in the naive belief that she was saving Brooke's life. The ink on the brand transfer documents had barely dried when the fragile illusion of Hope's sacrifice was violently shattered. Seeking a moment of quiet respite to process the magnitude of what she had just done, Hope wandered near the executive offices. It was there, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, that she overheard a conversation that would alter the trajectory of her life forever. The voices belonged to Brooke and Ridge, and the tone was not one of despair, fragility, or impending relapse. Instead, it was laced with a chilling, victorious satisfaction. Hope froze, her breath catching in her throat as the horrifying reality of their words began to sink into her exhausted, traumatized mind. Through the slightly ajar door, Hope listened in paralyzed horror as Ridge boasted about the flawless execution of their plan. The severe psychological breakdown, the terrifying threat of an alcohol relapse, the desperate pleas for intervention, it had all been a meticulously orchestrated, sickeningly cruel lie. Ridge had masterminded the entire fabrication, weaponizing Brooke's history of addiction to emotionally blackmail Hope into returning to Forrester Creations. And Brooke, the mother for whom Hope had just sacrificed her entire career and dignity, had willingly participated in the deception. Brooke had faked her illness, playing the role of the tragic, relapsing victim to perfection, all to force Hope to abandon Katie and surrender to Steffy's humiliating terms. The betrayal hit Hope with the force of a physical blow, tearing through her chest and leaving her gasping for air. This was not a corporate maneuver. This was a profound, unforgivable violation of her deepest traumas and most sacred vulnerabilities. Her own mother and stepfather had deliberately exploited her paralyzing fear of Brooke's alcoholism, using her boundless love and protective instincts as weapons of psychological manipulation. As Hope stood in the hallway, the world around her seemed to warp and dissolve. Every belief she held about family, love, and loyalty crumbled into dust. The realization that she had been played, that her monumental sacrifice was the punchline to Ridge and Brooke's sick corporate joke, completely broke her spirit. In that agonizing moment, Hope lost all remaining faith in the concept of family. The Forresters and the Logans were no longer her kin. They were ruthless, toxic predators who would stop at nothing to control her life and her talents. She realized that to them, she was not a daughter, a sister, or a mother. She was merely an asset to be acquired, a pawn to be moved, and a threat to be neutralized through any means necessary. The deep, unconditional love she had always offered them had been met with calculated cruelty. A cold, eerie calm washed over Hope, replacing the crushing guilt and anxiety that had plagued her for weeks. The tears stopped falling. The panic subsided. Only a dark, absolute resolve remained in her shattered heart. Hope did not confront Brooke and Ridge. She did not burst into the office to scream her outrage or demand her brand back from Steffy. Such actions belonged to a woman who still cared, a woman who still believed that communication could mend the broken pieces of her life. Hope was no longer that woman. She turned away from the executive suite and walked out of Forrester Creations like a ghost, her footsteps silent against the polished floors. She drove straight to the Spencer mansion, moving with a robotic, terrifying efficiency. She gathered only the absolute essentials, her mind operating with a singular, desperate focus. She was going to disappear, and she was going to take the only person in the world who truly mattered to her, her beautiful daughter, Beth. Before vanishing into the sprawling expanse of Los Angeles, Hope sat at her desk to write one final message. It was not a standard goodbye letter. It was a devastating, bitter testament to her shattered soul. The words she penned were dark, final, and dripping with an agonizing despair that read with the chilling weight of a suicide note. She detailed the exact nature of their betrayal, exposing the sheer cruelty of Ridge's manipulation and Brooke's willing complicity in faking a relapse. She wrote of her complete psychological exhaustion, declaring that they had finally succeeded in killing the Hope they once knew. Every sentence was a dagger aimed directly at the hearts of the people who had destroyed her, a haunting farewell that offered no forgiveness and no hope of return. With the letter left prominently on the desk, Hope scooped a sleeping Beth into her arms and walked out the door. She left behind her phone, her credit cards, and every tie to the toxic empires of Forrester and Logan. She stepped out into the cool night air, letting the darkness swallow her whole. For the first time in her life, Hope was truly free from the manipulative grasp of her family, but it was a freedom born of absolute tragedy and profound heartbreak. She was a mother on the run, driven by a shattered mind and a desperate need to protect her child from the poisonous legacy of her bloodline. The brilliant designer who had just conquered the fashion world was gone, replaced by a fugitive seeking asylum from her own flesh and blood. The discovery of the letter the following morning triggered a shockwave of unprecedented terror throughout the city. It was Liam who found the note, his blood running cold as his eyes scanned the bitter, final words. The sheer despair radiating from the paper was unmistakable, leading him to immediately fear the absolute worst for Hope's life and safety. His frantic, panicked calls quickly summoned Brooke, Ridge, Steffy, and Katie to the Spencer estate. As Brooke read the letter, the color drained entirely from her face, replaced by a sickening, horrifying realization. The manipulative game she had played with Ridge had not just forced her daughter's surrender. It had completely broken her daughter's will to live within their world. Absolute pandemonium erupted across both the Logan and Forrester families as the reality of the situation set in. The bitter rivalries and corporate wars that had consumed them for weeks instantly evaporated, replaced by a frantic, desperate search for a woman who had vanished without a trace. Brooke collapsed in a fit of genuine, hysterical grief, the full weight of her deceptive cruelty crashing down upon her as she realized she might have lost her daughter forever. Ridge stood in stunned silence, his arrogant manipulations having resulted in the unthinkable destruction of his family. Steffy, Katie, and Liam were left to grapple with the terrifying reality that their relentless pressure and toxic battles had driven Hope to the absolute edge. As police were called and search parties were hastily organized, a haunting, terrifying question hung over Los Angeles. Had they pushed Hope Logan Spencer too far, and would they ever see her or baby Beth alive again?